topic is, I don't know how many of you are interested in religion. Maybe you are religious, but you never really paid attention to religion as something to think about or reflect about, all right? So this is the lecture outline. I start with an introduction, and I've gathered some interesting facts about religion before talking about religion in Korea, okay? So under religion of Korea, start with a brief history, okay? Followed by contemporary situation, and I titled it Religious Diversity in Korea. And lastly, the rise of Christianity in Korea. And it's, I think one of the assigned chapters is actually focuses on this particular topic. All right? Introduction. I start with a quote. We have just enough religion to make us hate, but not enough to make us love one another. Don't you find this quote really profound? It's by Jonathan Swift, the writer of the Gulliver's Travels. So, again, it's one of my favorite quotes, right? Have you guys seen the movie called The Bucket List? Anyway, it's a movie about these two guys who are in their 70s. The movie stars these two gentlemen of Hollywood, Jack Nicklaus and Morgan Freeman. Anyway, these two stars, they're in their 70s, they're terminally ill. So they are hospitalized for surgery or treatment, and they're stuck in the same room. So they become friends, and they draw up a bucket list. You know what bucket list is, right? So in case the students at Nanjing University are not familiar with this, a bucket list is a list of things that you write up that you want to do before you die. So things you want to do before you die, you call it a bucket list. Anyway, they write up a bucket list, and they start visiting places and doing things. And one of them was visiting or seeing the pyramid in Egypt, right? And this happens only in the movies. On top of a pyramid, these two guys are sitting, and this is the conversation that takes place. The ancient Egyptians had a beautiful belief about death. When their souls got to the entrance to heaven, the guards asked two questions. Their answers determined whether they were able to enter or not. And these are the two questions. And I hope you remember this. All right? Take these with you for the rest of your life. Always remind yourself. First, have you found joy in your life? Second question, has your life brought joy to others? I think, you may sort of think of the first question as being irrelevant to you because maybe you're having fun. But I think the first question really matters to especially Korean students because they spend all their life studying, and they're still doing that because life is so competitive in Korea. I don't know if they are if they are finding time to have fun, and maybe this applies to the students at Nanjing University too. Okay? So anyway, I thought I'd pass that on to you, all right? Next, thing is this. And the caption goes, the heart of the matter is that it's a matter of heart. Anyway, this photo was taken in Damascus, capital of Syria, in 1899. The dwarf is Samar. He's a Christian and cannot walk. The one who carries him on his back is Muhammad. He is a Muslim and he is blind. Muhammad relies on Samar to tell him where to go, and Samar uses his friend's back to navigate the city streets. They were both orphans and lived in the same room in an orphanage. Samar was a Hakawati, which is the ancient Arab art of storytelling. He had the gift of narration and told stories to the customers of a cafe in Damascus. Muhammad, on the other hand, sold bolbolas. It's a traditional Syrian snack in front of the same cafe, and he liked to listen to his friends' stories. One day, when he retired to his room, Muhammad found his companion dead. He wept and mourned his friend for 7 days straight. When asked how they got along so well, even though they're of different faith, of being different religions, and he said only this, "Here we're the same," pointing his hand to his heart, and the famous saying, the heart of the matter is that it's a matter of heart. I don't know how you could translate it in your own understanding, but anyway, beautiful story, right? Anyway, getting to more practical stuff. Can you rank the following list of some of the world's major religions from the fastest growing to the slowest growing? Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. Well, just tell me, which one do you think is the fastest growing? Christianity? It's Islam. Okay? So here we go. The correct order is Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, and Buddhism. So if you were not able to really come up with this order, you cannot really blame yourself, because it's not something you would sort of think about. Islam is currently the world's second largest religion with an estimated 1.8 billion followers. And from 2015 to 2060, the Muslim population is projected to grow by 70%. Okay? So that's why, again, it's number two religion as far as the number of followers is concerned, but it'll become number one soon enough. Christianity, currently the world's largest religion with some 2.3 billion followers, is projected to rise by 34% by 2060. This means that Muslims will likely outnumber Christians in the second half of this century. Okay? So let's say at least by 2050. As the third largest religious group in 2015, Hinduism has nearly 1.1 followers and is projected to grow by 27% by 2060. Judaism, with 14.3 million followers, is projected to grow by only 15% by 2060. Lastly, Buddhism, which currently has nearly 500 million followers, is projected to decline by 7% between 2015 and 2060 due to an aging population and low fertility rates. I guess they're just meditating too much instead of being more secular and being, because they are taught to sort of do away with their desire, remember, for the noble truth. Anyway, these are some facts about religion, all right? So the word religion comes from the Latin word religio, which means respect for what is sacred. The first religious act is believed to be that of intentional burial of the dead. So through excavations and archaeological work, we find that this happened as early as 300,000 years ago. And the earliest form of religion was reportedly animism. Remember what animism is? The belief that everything has a spirit, right? So, you see, transport yourself back to like 300,000 years ago. When there's a tornado or heavy rain, how do you explain that, right? So people in antiquity understood as, wind or these natural phenomena as having a spirit, okay? And the spirit is causing all these natural phenomena to happen, okay? There are approximately 4,200 religions in the world. I mean, this is according to World Christian Encyclopedia, but it's hard to believe, right? Only 4,200 religions. I guess it depends on how you define religion, all right? So, but anyway, excuse me. Religion has been a major influence on the arts, including architecture, music, literature, and visual art. If you're not familiar with how religion has played a role in music, you cannot really appreciate Western classical music without, works by Bach, Mozart, right? With religious themes, right? Like Requiem and Mass, right? Many religious holidays are celebrated around the world, including Christmas. Am I missing anything else other than Christmas? Anyway, many religious practices have been adapted into secular traditions, like wedding ceremony. It began as a religious ceremony, but now it's done even by secular people, right? People who are atheists or people who don't follow any religion, they still hold wedding in a, what typical wedding ceremony is like, right? And also funerals, very religious ritual, but it's now held in a non-religious way, right? Also, many religions have a concept of an afterlife, which is where the soul goes after death. The concept of the golden rule, you know what the golden rule is? It's the idea that you treat others as you would like to be treated by others. So you think that this is limited to Christianity, but no. This idea is found in practically every major religion of the world, right? Religions perform many functions, including the reinforcement of morality, promotion of social unity, and provision of emotional support. The last one is this. When you're feeling down, when you're suffering from certain personal tragedies, you turn to religion for emotional support, right? So that's what the last one is about. Religion has often been used to justify and or legitimize political and social systems, such as the divine right of kings in the during the Middle Ages. And also, if you look at any country in the world today, whether it's Philippines, whether it's India, whether it's Bangladesh, whether it's Ecuador or Mexico, dominant religion of the dominant class, they sort of go hand in hand. You know what I'm saying? So religion legitimizes the existing order. It never really challenges, right? So if you think of any country where there is just terrible inequality, does the dominant religion of that country challenge the dominant class and say, take care of your people? Or does it keep silent? In most cases. It keeps silent because it's the religion of the dominant class, right? So that's the point that is being made. Religion also has been used to justify violence and conflicts, such as the Crusades and the Inquisition. And religion has also been a major force for social change, including the civil rights movement in the United States. Lastly, religion is one of the oldest human institutions. According to anthropologists, there have probably been about 100,000 religions throughout human history. Just some of the interesting numbers to know of. New religions constantly emerge and disappear over time. Only the religions with enough followers eventually last. In fact, all religions begin as cults. Did you know this? Did you know that Christianity was also a cult in the beginning? Because it was so different from the existing belief system and ritual at the time. So it's one of those things you hear it and it stays with you for the rest of your life. All religions begin as cults. Okay? All right, that concludes the section on the facts about religion. And now I turn to things more Korean. Okay? So the first part of my discussion on religion in Korea is a historical survey, how religion or the dominant religion has changed over time, and so on. So the first period that I want to tell you about, very brief, okay? It's the Three Kingdoms period, Goryeo Dynasty, and Joseon Dynasty, all put together. And this is where, from time immemorial, Koreans believed in shamanism, right? Their indigenous religion, sort of unorganized, sort of a primitive, sort of a tribal religion, right? And so, again, we're talking about up to 2,500 years ago. The only religious belief that Koreans had was this shamanism, right? Like animism, where everything has spirits. And to this context, two religions are introduced from China: Confucianism and Buddhism. Okay? Again, before the introduction of these two religions, Koreans believed in just one religion, and that was shamanism. Okay? So, and soon enough, Buddhism becomes a dominant religion. Okay? And so when you hear of Buddhism like 2,000 years ago, you shouldn't be thinking about Koreans meditating, because Buddhism preaches one thing, but at the level of the masses, they believe in Buddhism because Buddhas, they grant earthly wishes. If you pray to Buddha, they believed. that Buddhas grant earthly wishes. Okay? So that's why Buddhism became popular. Because before, before Buddhas, they only had, local spirits, right? Or the spirit of the mountain and so on, right? But to their pantheon, the Buddhas were added, right? So anyway, from this early on, Buddhism became a dominant religion along with shamanism, okay? And during the Goryeo dynasty, this is the dynasty before the Joseon dynasty, and this is the heyday of Buddhism. This is when, the famous temple in Bulguksa? This is when original Bulguksa was built during the Goryeo dynasty. Okay? And many famous temples were built during this period. And so Buddhism became a de facto state religion, okay? Receiving extensive privileges and financial support, right? So Buddhist temples during this period became influential centers, replete with extensive infrastructure, cadre, tenants, slaves, and commercial ventures, okay? And monks enjoying high social status and having long enjoyed extensive privileges became politically involved and were embroiled in many types of corruption. Okay? There are many stories of, them like eating meat, engaging in sexual activities, and so on, right? Just corrupted. And look how powerful Buddhism was during the Goryeo dynasty. At the end of the Goryeo dynasty, the wealth of Buddhist temples as a whole was enormous. For example, these are just estimates. There were approximately 13,000 temples across the country. 13,000, when there were only 4 million population. Okay? And it is estimated that temples were home to 150,000 monks who controlled over 100,000 slaves. Can you imagine monks with slaves? Instead of them sort of experiencing suffering to reach nirvana, it was like, hey, slave Kim, come here and wash my feet. I mean, that's what they did practically, right? And they owned up to 1/3 of all cultivated land in the country. Again, we're talking about not just religious organization, right? That preaches the otherworldliness, right? To do away with desire. And yet they were so this worldly, right? So that's why, Buddhism at the time was considered corrupted, okay? And that's why when the new dynasty began, again, people all knew how corrupt Buddhism became, okay? So it was just a matter of time, and that time happened in 1392. New dynasty was launched, and one of the first things it did was to suppress Buddhism, because it was fully aware that the Buddhism was corrupt. Okay. So eventually, Joseon dynasty suppressed all religions except Confucianism. Okay. So in comparisons, this is not really new, right? During the Middle Ages in Europe, what happened? The Catholic Church had a monopoly right? So if you preached anything different from Catholicism, you're burned alive, right? For preaching witchcraft, right? So anyway, so all religions were suppressed, but particularly Buddhism was targeted. And look what happened here. Buddhist temples in towns were forcibly closed, destroyed, converted to houses, or forcibly relocated to the mountainside. So if you ever wondered, so if you may get a wrong impression that temples in Korea are in the mountains because the monks are into meditation. But that's not what happened. It has a historical reason, okay? And that has to do with the fact that Buddhism was totally suppressed by the Joseon dynasty. There were actually typically the temples in towns were either forcibly closed or forcibly relocated to the mountainside. So that's why you see all these temples in the mountains in Korea today. Okay? And also monks were chased from towns, and they were forced to live in the mountains and were not allowed to enter towns. Okay? And can you believe this? Status of a monk, which was the highest during the Goryeo dynasty, fell to the level of butchers, concubines, and slaves overnight. So for example, during the Goryeo dynasty, if you had a son who became a nun, it was a pride of your family. So it'd be like, oh, my son is a monk, right? Something to brag about, right? But during the Joseon dynasty, if you had anybody as a monk, you hid it because it was embarrassment. It was a shame. Because again, in the same level as slave, okay? All land, assets, and slaves owned by temples were confiscated by the government. And this continued until the 19th century, late 19th century Korea. Okay? All right, so that's Goryeo dynasty and Joseon dynasty. As I said, very brief. Now, one of the momentous events in the history of Korea as far as religion is concerned is the introduction of Catholicism in 1784. Okay? Catholicism was introduced in 1784 when the son of an ambassador to China returned to Korea with religious text on Catholicism. Now, this did not happen by chance. When friends of this guy, the son, knew that this friend was going to go to Beijing, they asked him to bring back, because they heard about Catholicism being present in China. So they wanted to learn more about this new religion. So again, let's say this guy's name was Lee Seung-hun, the son. So the Lee Seung-hun's friends asked him to bring back religious texts on Catholicism when he came back to Korea, and that's what happened. And so again, this happened in 1784, and until 1836, we're talking about for 50 years. So isn't this amazing? So this guy who goes to Beijing as the son of an ambassador, or son of an ambassador, comes back with religious texts on Catholicism in 1784, and reading those books, many Koreans became Christians. They became Catholics. Okay? Without any Catholic priest, indoctrinating them on the religion, by just reading the text, they became Catholics. And among themselves, they held Mass and so on. Believe it or not. Can you think of any other case where that similar thing happened? Probably not, right? Anyway, finally in 1836, French priest arrived. So, for about a half century, Catholicism was practiced among Koreans in the absence of a single Catholic priest or missionary. Okay? So this aspect of Catholic history in Korea is very interesting. So this is an illustration from the 1901 book. Okay? But the presence of this new religion was heavily persecuted. Okay, so ever since the Joseon court learned of this new learning, they were alarmed that because again, Korea at the time was a so-called hermit kingdom with only limited contact with China, and everything as far as knowledge, religion, and social happenings were concerned, it was totally dominated by Confucianism. So anything other than that was seen as subversive. Okay, so they were looking at all these Catholics and the presence of Catholicism with profound suspicion, and finally persecutions took place, series of persecutions. So up to 10,000 martyrs. Okay? In the history of Catholicism, I don't know if there are many countries where that many martyrs happened, right? And vast majority of the martyrs were men and women, old and young, and married or single. Anyway, the martyrs also included 9 French missionary priests and 1 bishop. Okay? So this is a key point. By the time of the last persecution in 1866, which alone resulted in around 8,000 martyrs, there are only 20,000 Catholics in Korea, which means that about half of all the Catholics at the time were martyred. Okay? And why did that happen? Because Catholics refused to perform ancestor worship. Okay? Because at the time, ancestor worship was considered a form of idolatry. And if you're familiar with Christianity, one of the 10 commandments is that you should not commit idolatry. Okay? Meaning serving or believing in spirit or God other than Christian God, right? So ancestor worship is about you idolizing the spirit of your ancestor, right? So that's why it was banned. So at the time, we had a sort of like a de facto law that expected or required every Korean to perform ancestor worship. But these Catholics refused to do so, and that was good enough for the Joseon court to execute this many Catholics, right? And a typical method of execution was beheading, okay? And at the last minute, all they had to do was to say, okay, I will perform ancestor worship. But they didn't, okay? So it took a big courage for these Catholics to, face death for their faith. In May 1984, at a mass attended by 600,000 people in a square in central Seoul, Pope John Paul II conferred sainthood on 93 Koreans and 10 French missionaries who gave their lives for their faith between 1839 and 1867. So, it marked the first canonization outside Rome since the Middle Ages. So, conferring sainthood, it all happened in Rome since the Middle Ages. But so, for the first time since the Middle Ages, canonization took place outside Rome, and it happened in Seoul. So, you guys are living in a historic right now in a historic city, as far as the Catholic Church is concerned. 130 martyrs canonized were the largest number of saints created on one occasion. Okay? The large number of Korean martyrs also made South Korea the country with the fourth largest number of saints of the Roman Catholic Church, after Italy, Spain, France. Isn't this just amazing fact? Korea with the fourth largest number of saints in the world. After such a Catholic countries like Italy, Spain, and France. I mean, you may not be a Catholic, but this is just an amazing fact. At least for me. Well, anyway. Third sort of event. So just to give you sort of a sense of timeline here. So the first religious landscape of Korea is when shamanism was the only religion, right? To that, during the Three Kingdom period, Confucianism and Buddhism were introduced. And Korea had to wait close to 2,000 years before a new religion was introduced, and that happened in 1784 with Catholicism. And exactly 100 years after the introduction of Catholicism, in 1884, Protestantism was introduced. Okay? So we have, again, shamanism, Confucianism and Buddhism, Catholicism, and Protestantism, right? In 1884. And unlike Catholicism, Protestantism was formally introduced when Protestant missionaries arrived in Korea in 1884. Their arrival was part of missionary expansion in Asia following their efforts in China and Japan. Protestantism first arrived in Seoul, but a large majority of the Korean Christian population prior to the division of the country in 1945 lived in northern half of the peninsula. So I don't know if you know this fact, but again, a large majority of Christians before the division, they lived in North Korea, okay? Not South Korea. So that's why Pyongyang, which is the capital of North Korea, was called a Jerusalem of the East because there are so many Christians living in Pyongyang. So if you believe in this idea that people who are suffering have a bigger tendency to turn to religion, Korea is a classic example. as I may have said before, North Korea has always suffered from discrimination from the South. They suffer from colder weather. They suffer from a smaller population. And they suffer from food shortage much more often than people in the South. Okay? So that's why when a new religion was introduced, they were more sort of open to new religion because of their suffering was bigger than that of the people in the South. If you believed in this suffering and religious openness link, okay? So, for example, in 1945, Pyongyang had 300,000 residents, of whom 1/6 were church-going Christians. Okay? So here is a picture in the first decade of 20th century, a church in Pyongyang, just packed with Christians. Can you believe, like, Koreans who have only believed in shamanism and Buddhism, you know, turning to this new religion with a picture of maybe back then they didn't have a color print, right? But, you know, we're talking about God who has blue eyes, kind of, right? Okay, we'll take a break after this. And so up to Protestantism, it was religion-focused, sort of a history of religion in Korea. But the last one is more of a time period, right? And this is, you know, the Japanese colonial period from 1910 to 1945. And so during this period, religious freedom was generally suppressed. Okay, so to be more specific, in the beginning, like for example, from 1910 to early 1920s, there was definitely a relatively greater sense of religious freedom, but from like in 1925, when they introduced this Shinto shrine, sort of obeisance. You know, you see, Japan wanted to make Koreans loyal subjects of the Japanese emperor. And one of the ways they wanted to do that was to make Koreans attend Shinto shrines. Okay? And the reason why this became controversial was because Shinto, I mean, if you just look at Shinto, it's like animism, right? But during World War II, they invented something called state Shinto, where the whole religion centered around the glorification and sort of and also sort of making the emperor the same as God. Okay, so that's why when Christians were also required to attend Shinto ceremonies, it became a very serious issue. So because of this, you know, the general description of of religion during the Japanese colonial period is one of sort of suppression. You cannot, you know, full freedom. Okay. So following the liberation in 1945 and subsequent division of Korea, many Christians in the communist North fled to the South. And Christians who resettled in the South at the time were reportedly more than 1 million. Okay? All right, so I'll stop here. So that concludes my brief survey on the history of religion in Korea. And what time is it now? It's 6:01, and I'll see you back here at 6:10. Okay? Okay, welcome back. Isn't religion exciting for you guys? No? Well, anyway, we have just 2 more sections to cover. I guess if I need to sort of bring some excitement to your participation in today's class, I guess maybe this will help. The last section is something that you may consider with greater attention for the final exam. Okay? Because I think it's such a unique phenomenon, right? How Christianity is so popular in Korea. So let me ask you this. Can you think of any other country in Asia where Christianity is a major religion? That's true. So we have one country where Christianity is a major religion, and it's Catholicism, right? And it's almost understandable why that happened. Because the Philippines was a colony of Spain, a Catholic country, for over like 300 years. Korea, it has a colonial history, but it was Japan, which is not a Christian country. So let's just say the Philippines is the only country in all of Asia where Catholicism is a major or the major religion. Now, let's qualify Korean case. Is there any other country in all of Asia where Protestantism is a major religion? All of Asia, we're talking about 2/3 of the world population living, maybe that's too much, almost close to 2/3, right? Again, are you thinking? Again, in terms of the size of the population who are followers of Protestantism, China has a larger number, much larger number than that of Korea, but Protestantism is not a major religion of China. Okay? In terms of the proportion of the population, we're talking about 2 to 3% of Chinese who are followers of Protestant Christianity, whereas Korea, we're talking about 20% of the population who follow Protestantism, and Protestantism is the #1 religion in the country. So you see why this phenomenon is so unique? Okay? Again, because in all of Asia, Korea is the only country where Protestant Christianity is the #1 religion or major religion. Okay, that's one reason why this is an interesting phenomenon. And another reason is, when it comes to sort of a cultural patterns, you know how Korea, China, Japan are Confucian cultures, right? And we're also neighboring countries. And in all of 3 countries, Korea is the only country where Protestant church or Christianity became successful only in Korea. Okay? And if you just make a comparison to Japan, not even 1% of the Japanese have converted to Christianity. Okay? But you could see how we share sort of so many things in common as far as religious tradition is concerned, right? Buddhism, all very popular in all 3 countries. Confucianism, all popular in all 3 countries. And to a certain extent, Taoism, right? But out of all these contexts, Korea is the only country where Protestantism prospered, right? So we'll turn to that a little bit later, but let me show you this one. Okay. So did I show you this before? Okay, this is the religious population of Korea. And we've been taking census, and I start from 1985, but because 1985 was the first year where census on religious population was taken. That's why we start from here. And the last census we had was in 2015, and Protestantism, religion with the largest population. And so that's that. And do you also notice something different here or unique? Just looking at the table here, anything that stands out? No? Well, it's the proportion of the population with no religious affiliation. It stands at 56%, right? And that's very high, okay? And so anyway, this is the trends in the number of believers by religion. The yellow line is the Protestant Christians, and that's as of 2015, largest. And Buddhism, which had been number one religion, fell to number 2, and Catholicism, number 3. Okay? Now, turning to this pie graph, you see the largest proportion is taken by those who profess no religious affiliation, 56%. Now, the question here is, do you think this figure is higher, much higher, or lower than, similar to the global average? I think I need to rephrase this. What do you think? Yeah? Much higher. Here we go. So remember, again, 56%, right? No religion. This is global. No religion, only 16%. So Korea's rate is about 4 times higher, am I right? Yeah, than the global average. Okay? So this is quite amazing. It's the same year, 2015. And it's the proportion of those who said, I believe in a religion by age group. You can see how, as of 2021, this is not from the census. This is from like Gallup Korea. Okay? So you can see how the proportion of people in all age groups who believe in religion is declining. Okay? And the lowest proportion comes from those in their 20s. So the younger the age, the lower the religiosity. Okay? And let's skip that. Before turning to the Christian issue in Korea, I just want to point out how religion still has a pervasive influences on Korean society. And, you know, for those of you who are interested in NGOs, I want to point this out in case you may not know, and I probably think you don't know this, right? And that is, if you're asked what is the most powerful and the wealthiest NGO, what answer would you have? Anyway, the correct answer is religious organization. church, Buddhist temples, they are the wealthiest and the most powerful. But they're always quiet. Their motto is inaction. Right? Anyway. Pervasive influences of religion in Korea. First, it's a major employer in the country. Okay? So this is from 2011, but look at this. So these clergy, numbering over close to 250,000, they're, making a living, to be frank, right? By being pastors, priests, and monks, and so on, right? And there are all these places of worship, and if they're big enough, they hire office workers, caretakers, and so on, right? And also, they operate schools at all levels of education. And unlike, let's say, maybe in your country where a handful of universities may be operated by religious organization, we're talking about tens, dozens, okay? Some of them most prestigious, right? Like Yonsei, Yuhua Women's University, and so on, right? So 1/5 of all colleges and universities are owned and operated by either religious organizations, Christian organizations, or Christian individuals, all of which require you to attend a chapel service every week. Aren't you guys lucky that you guys are here and not at Yonsei? Because if you were there, you had to attend a chapel service every week. And you may say, what's wrong with that? But even if you're Christian, you got to think, how could the university force Buddhists, atheists, and even Catholics to attend very Protestant chapel service in today's days of human rights and so on, right? Respecting differences and so on, right? So anyway, these churches also operate hospitals, research institutes. They operate commercial enterprises like newspapers and printing houses. Each of the three major religions operates its own nationally broadcast cable network and even radio station. Okay? Provide various social services, including orphanages, shelters for the homeless, childcare, and counseling. So if you think of this and you go, wow, churches are doing a lot of good things. But yes, they're doing a lot of good things, but the subsidies, the money is provided by the government. Okay? They're sort of doing this sort of for the good of the society, but again, the money actually comes from the government, okay? From taxpayers' money, that is. All right, the last part, which I advertised as being very important for your final exam. Now, before the midterm exam, whenever I said this is something important, did it end up being a lie, or did I give you good guidance as far as what to expect for the exam? What is your response? Being a good guide? Okay. So, if you think this will be in the final exam, it will be on the final exam in one way or another, and that is whether as a essay exam or short answer. Okay? Anyway, I already mentioned this enough, right? It introduced to Korea in 1884. The largest religion with nearly 10 million followers, or about 20% of the country's 50 million people. And which country has the world's largest Protestant population? Just for fun. It's a trivia fact. Which country has the world's largest Protestant population? I'm leaning toward the USA. And the answer is yes, US, 160 million. What about the second largest? Germany sounds good. It's Nigeria. Third, China. Again, it is said that there are many shy Christians in China, meaning they do not openly say it, but again, that's just an estimate, right? Students at Nanjing University, would that number be sort of shocking, or is it something that a lot of students think about or know about? 대답 좀 해줄래요? 아니, 말 쓰는 걸로. Anyway, fourth, Brazil. Fifth, South Africa. UK, Congo, Germany, Kenya, India. Where is Korea? Well, it's going to go down quite far because we have just 10 million, right? So, anyway, the growth of Protestantism in Korea had been particularly pronounced from the early 1960s to the end of the 1980s. Since the early 1960s, when Korea's Protestants scarcely topped 1 million mark, the number of Protestant Christians increased faster than in any other country, nearly doubling every decade. So here is you see how this line is the number of Protestant Christians from 1960 to 1970. I mean, this is not an accurate reflection, but at least sort of visually it gives you an idea how explosive growth Protestantism was from the 1960s to the end of the 1980s. Christianity in modern era is an urban phenomenon, as a vast majority of Christians live in cities and urban centers. Korea boasts some of the largest churches in the world. Greater Seoul, meaning metropolitan Seoul, is home to 23 of the 50 largest churches in the world. In fact, 5 of the 10 largest churches in the world are found in Seoul, a city of churches, including the world's largest, namely Yeouido Full Gospel Church, with a total membership of 500,000. There are 170 denominations. Maybe it's over information for you guys, right? Anyway, never mind. Now, but this one is interesting fact. Korean Protestant churches send more missionaries abroad than most other countries. Again, a country with only like a 150-year history now sends the second largest number of missionaries abroad, okay, after the USA. So USA had 46,000 missionaries worldwide as of 2022. Korea was second with 22,000. Isn't it this just amazing fact? Right? Simply amazing. So I already talked about this, so I'm going to skip. So the question is, what are the factors which facilitated the rise of Protestantism as the largest religion in South Korea today? Can anybody answer this question? Anyone? Okay. After your extended period of silence, I guess it's a sign that I should just talk about what I have prepared, right? Anyway, factors for the rise of Christianity in Korea. First factor, I would call it national traumas and the hope for sovereignty. And this is what I mean. Do you guys remember when Protestant Christianity was introduced again? What's the year? Yes, 1884. So you have to know what was happening in 1884 in Korea and its surrounding area. You see, Korea did not have any contact with the outside world except limited contact with China. But Japan, which was under Western influence as early as the mid-19th century, already had Western sort of style machineries and also arms. So they approached South Korea and actually forced open Korea for treaty in 1876. So 8 years before the first American missionary arrived in Korea, Korea was already under siege. It was already sensing that things are happening in a very negative way. Because, again, Korean port was forced open by the Japanese with the superior arms. And because of the actions of the Japanese, China and Russia were also taking actions to have an influence on Korea. So there was this deep sense of crisis that Korea could lose its sovereignty, okay, because of, again, Japan and other neighboring countries, including Russia and China. So during this sense of national crisis, the Korean leaders, Korean elite, including the emperor, wanted to appeal to countries that sent missionaries to Korea in the hope of preserving its sovereignty. So, as you may know, well, let me ask you, when missionaries went to foreign lands, were they typically welcomed, or were they seen or received with suspicion? Yes, especially that happened in countries with with advanced civilization, like Japan and China. When the missionaries came, they were received with suspicion and hostility. One exception, and that happened to be Korea. Okay? So that's why, again, in 1884, when the missionaries arrived in Korea, Korea was in deep crisis because neighboring countries were vying for control of Korea. And they wanted to seek help from the countries that sent missionaries. Because for them, missionaries were trustworthy because they were sent from countries with no imperial quest or attempt. Again, at least at the time of the arrival of the missionaries, England had no real sort of at least did not show any sign of colonizing, let's say, Korea or any other countries in its vicinity, right? Anyway, maybe if I say too much, I may not be able to justify what I'm saying. But as you can see there, that's the number one, not in any particular order, but that's one factor. And the second one is provision of social services by the missionaries. You see, we're talking about the late 19th century when Korea had nothing. We just subsisted on the most basic food items. There was no real welfare of any kind. We didn't have any, orphanage, even though there were many orphans. Did we have adequate medical service? No. We only had Oriental medicine, which was available only for the wealthy. Okay? But these missionaries come, what do? They build schools for common people. Before the missionaries, education was only available to the elite. Only the sons of Yangban, the aristocratic class, right? But these missionaries come, they again build schools, not only for boys of common people, but also girls for the first time, okay? And they also provide medical care, and they introduced vaccines against like smallpox, polio, and did they charge money for this? No, they provided these services for free. Of course, they charged minimal fee to those who could afford, okay? But is it just a coincidence where early missionaries were all doctors and teachers, believe it or not? The background check of all these missionaries show there were doctors, nurses, teachers. Okay? So they were targeting this particular area of missionary work, that before handing out the Bible, the missionaries wanted to impress the population that Christianity is good. It brings benefits to people, right? And they did so by providing services that were not available otherwise. Again, Korea at the time was one of the poorest countries in the world. No real medical care to speak of. No education to speak of as far as mass education is concerned. And all of these were provided by the missionaries for the first time ever in the history of Korea. So do you think that was impressive or not to Koreans? Of course it was impressive. Third, so this is a rare picture of the Royal Korean Hospital. So it doesn't look anything like the modern hospital. But at the time, oh wow, it was, it was where you go and you were saved, physically speaking. And this is missionaries with students at Haewa Hakdang. In 1906, they're all girls, right? In Hambo. Missionaries with their students at Ihwa Hakdang, okay, which later became Ihwa Women's University. Okay? This is students at Ihwa Hakdang in 1907. So from like a grade 1 to more advanced grades, right? So anyway, by the early 1900s, missionaries established hundreds of schools all over the peninsula. It's simply amazing. So if you talk about the provision of mass education in Korea, it was not launched by the Korean government. It was launched by the missionaries. Okay? So that's the third factor. No, second factor. Provision of services which were otherwise unavailable to Korean ordinary people, right? Third factor why Christianity became so popular is this affinity between Christianity and traditional values of Korean culture. Now, by now, when I say traditional religious values, what am I talking about? Anyway, Koreans, whether they are Christians or Buddhists or whatever, they have a tendency to pray for material things. And I'm sure people of all religious persuasions may pray for material things, but it's not everything. It's one of the things they do, right? Whereas for Koreans, steeped in shamanic tradition, it's all about praying for material wishes. Okay? Now, knowing this, Korean churches have emphasized that God, we're talking about Christian God, grants earthly wishes. So, have you heard of prosperity gospel? Prosperity gospel is that by converting to Christianity, meaning you accept Jesus Christ as your Savior and convert to Christianity, as a reward, you'll become rich. Okay, that's prosperity gospel. Now that's a very popular gospel in Korea because Koreans are sort of very receptive to this idea that if you sort of Koreans tend to strongly believe that prayer equals answered prayers, right? So that's why you, as you can see here, when missionaries and also pastors wanted to appeal to Korean masses, they sort of argued that Christianity has the same value as the Confucian values in emphasizing the importance of the family and also respecting parents. As you all know, one of the 10 commandments is thou shalt honor your parents, right? So that's equal to the importance of filial piety in Confucianism. And there's also an affinity between Christianity and shamanism in the sense that God is advanced as the Savior, again, who grants earthly wishes. Okay? So that's the third aspect of, or factor that made Christianity popular in Korea. And fourth is the churches serving as something akin to urban community centers or ethnic churches. So it goes like this. The Christianity grew most rapidly in the 1970s, 80s, 1960s, 70s, and 80s. And this is when Korea underwent rapid industrialization and urbanization, meaning many people flock to cities and urban centers. And when that happens, something like ethnic church in the West happened. So if you want to know what ethnic church is, it's another word for immigrant church. So let's say in LA, you know how many Korean churches there are? There are hundreds of Korean churches. And surveys show that about 70% of Korean Americans go to church. 70%. You can see how that is such a high figure, because in Korea, only about 30% are churchgoers, right? Including both Protestants and Catholics. So what ethnic churches do is that people who are uprooted, they go to these churches where they could meet their co-ethnics. They could meet other people from the same country. So they share, so they secure communal intimacy, identity, build a personal network, receive practical help, like getting a job, finding a place to live, and also meet potential marital partners. So again, when Korea was undergoing rapid urbanization and industrialization from the early 1960s to the end of the 1980s, again, that period coincides with the largest growth of Christians in Korea. And the point here that is made is this, that churches served as points of contact, points of meeting where people went to, again, here, to build personal network, receive practical help, meet potential marital partners, and so on. Okay? So if anything I'm sort of fully covering, you could refer to the assigned chapter from the textbook. Okay? So fifth is Christianity's association with things modern. You see, Christianity, at least, back half a century ago, was seen as a religion of more advanced nations. Okay, from the Korean perspective, Christianity was like a modern religion. Of course, in hindsight, how could religion that is a few thousand years old be modern, right? But at least because this religion came from the West. West, when I say West, the most economically developed countries, right? So, sort of Koreans at the time identify Christianity with, things modern, okay? And at the time, modernization was a national goal, right? And that's why, making Korea a Christian country meant for those who were Christians an entry, becoming a member of an international community that was wealthier. Okay, so that's fifth. The sixth was the appeal of Christian doctrine itself. Imagine a country where everything that they believed in was shaped by Confucianism and Buddhism and shamanism. And they learn about this new religion which preaches that about heaven. Again, before the Christian introduction of this idea, Koreans did not have any idea as to what heaven is like, right? So when so many Koreans were suffering, to hear about this heaven, where it is advanced as a paradise where one enjoys eternal life in abundance, free from worries, hunger, misdeeds, persecution, pain, or suffering. Again, these are all new, and they are all very attractive to Koreans who were suffering from hunger, poverty, and so on. Okay, so okay, and there's also other ideas like how everyone is equal before God, kind of, that idea also appealed to Koreans. So the Christian alternative, which offered a new and fascinating view of afterlife, utterly different from the traditional perception of death as something to be feared. Okay? All right, this is the last point, and I think for me, this is just a fascinating point. And I want to brag about myself, where a paper that I wrote is the first paper that makes this argument. Okay? In the Korean context, my work is the only work that makes this point, and it is this. Now, let me ask you, what is the dominant religion in South America? Every country in South America, what's the dominant religion? Christianity. Let's just call it Christianity. What about in Africa? What's the dominant religion in Africa? Yes, it's either Islam or Christianity or both. What's the dominant religion in Indonesia? Islam. What's the dominant religion in Malaysia? Islam. What's the dominant religion in the Philippines? Catholicism. And you see, the countries that I mentioned, the continents that I mentioned, all share one thing with Korea. And you know what that is? Now, why do you know that the Christian missionaries were sent to India in big numbers? What happened in India? Were the missionaries successful in penetrating India? Yes or no? No, right? Many missionaries were also sent to Muslim countries. What happened? They failed miserably. So you see, countries where Christianity or Islam newly prospered were countries where powerfully organized religions were absent. You see, when missionaries came to Korea, did Korea have a powerfully organized religion? Yes or no? No, because every religion was banned. What about in Japan? When the missionaries went to Japan, very strong presence of Buddhism. Monks were like up in arms, trying to protect their own market, so to speak, right? So when the missionaries went to Africa, they had a whole, they had the whole place to themselves in a way, because the tribes and whatever groups that existed when they arrived, they practiced maybe something like tribal religion, which is not a powerfully organized religion, just like in Korea. So just to give you an idea as to how Korea simply lacked powerfully organized religion, when the missionaries first came to Korea, they all sort of made this observation. Wow, I've never seen a country like Korea. There's no religion. Because, nobody was practicing religion. The only time they did anything religious was ancestor worship. And they did not do that on a daily basis or weekly basis, right? They did it only during Chuseok and Lunar New Year's Day and on death anniversaries. And they did it privately at home. That's why, again, Korea lacked powerfully organized religion at the time of the introduction of Christianity. And the same fate happened in all of Africa, all of South America, okay? Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. And am I missing out on any other countries where there was lack of powerfully organized religion and new religion simply took over? Okay. All right, that concludes today's lecture. And do you have any questions? Okay, thank you. And next week's topic is something very exciting, and it's aging of Korea. Right? Okay, thank you.